So this hormone is a thyroid hormone. I'm going to draw the same triangle but with a different color. Okay, carrier protein. Now this is a thyroid hormone. Can you guys take a guess where the thyroid hormone is secreted from? The thyroid gland? Hope so. Okay, so thyroid hormone is carried as it gets pushed into the circulation, binds to a carrier protein, and is transported in the blood to its target site. Okay. Once it gets there, the carrier protein drops off the thyroid hormone, and the thyroid hormone moves into the cytoplasm. Because the thyroid hormone is also a non-polar type of hormone. Okay. So the thyroid hormone moves in here. Now later on we'll talk about different types of thyroid hormones, but basically, well actually let's talk about it right now. There's two types. There's a T4 and a T3. Okay. The T3 is its active form. T4 is its inactive form. So the thyroid gland secretes both T3 and T4 into the circulation. And both T3 and T4 is carried inside the circulation to its target sites. And both T3 and T4 will translocate from the blood into the cell. Okay? Now if you are a T3, you're good. This T3 then is going to be picked up by some kind of carrier protein inside the cell. Okay, so a different type of carrier protein. And that carrier protein is going to move that T3 molecule to the nucleus. From there, T3 dissociates and it moves into the nucleus. So let's say this is T3. T3, as it goes into the nucleus, it's going to look for these different types of nuclear hormone receptors, right? So the same type of receptor molecules, or very similar types of receptor molecules, but this time, again, it does have a ligand binding domain and a DNA binding domain. But remember, this ligand binding domain is very specific for the T3 molecule. So T3 moves in, and these receptors are already sitting on the DNA itself, okay? Or it may be floating around, who knows? It doesn't really matter. So the T3 will find this ligand binding domain and bind to it. Once it binds to it, it will activate this ligand, this DNA binding domain, right? So it does that. Now, the other hormone receptor here is sitting in that adjacent seat on this DNA molecule. But this ligand binding domain is not here to bind another T3. What it binds is this vitamin A derivative type of molecule called the 9-cis-retinoic acid. Okay. So it binds a 9-cis-retinoic acid. This is a T3. So once the 9-cis-retinoic acid binds to its appropriate ligand binding site, and the T3 binds to its appropriate ligand binding site, these two will be activated. But because it's two different ligands activating two different receptor complexes, they essentially form a heterodimer. Now remember, the steroid hormone forms a homodimer because it takes two of the same type of steroid hormone to activate this transcription factor. And this site right here that they bind to, this is called the thyroid response. So that's thyroid hormone. Carried in the blood, dropped off right at the target cells, translocates into the target cells, and then bind to a carrier protein inside the cytoplasm of that target cell. That carrier protein then moves this T3 to the nucleus where T3 dissociates and translocates inside the nucleus. T3 will find the ligand binding domain and binds to it. Once it binds to the ligand binding domain of this receptor molecule, it activates the DNA binding domain. Okay? The other half of this whole transcription factor is a different type of receptor molecule. But this receptor molecule, the ligand binding domain of this receptor molecule binds a 9-cis-retinoic acid, which is a vitamin A derivative. Okay, so you break down vitamin A and then you form this 9-cis-retinoic acid. Once this 9-cis-retinoic acid binds to its particular ligand binding domain, it activates the second complex, which is the DNA binding domain. Right? And then essentially these two forms what's known as a heterodimer. And once that heterodimer is formed, the transcription factor activates the transcription of the desired gene.